All right, welcome everyone. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly Public Safety Committee. It's Thursday, May 13th at 12 noon. Why don't we start with a roll call, Mandy, if you would.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Here.
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Zalatel?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton? Ms. Allard?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Thank you, Chairs.
Thank you, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Why don't we start with our Anchorage Police Department update? Who from APD is going to speak today?
It's Chief McCoy here. Good morning.
Morning, Chief. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mandy, if you would put up my crime stat slides, please. The first one.
Would you like the
The violent crime slide.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Okay, so while that's coming up, this week we announced our crime statistics for the first quarter of 2021, and I'm pleased to announce that we've seen continual declines in crime here over the last 18 months. Crime is most categories are continually going down for us. We did see some slight increases in a couple of categories, and I'll touch on those a little bit. In this first slide, you see we had a slight uptick in sexual assault, but everything else looks really good for violent crime there. And regarding sexual assault, we're really going to continue our efforts here at the police department to address these crimes through our multidisciplinary response. And, we have a very robust response system to these crimes. We definitely would like to make more of an impact in the preventative area. And that's going to require us to continue to work very closely with our state and community partners. And that's something that we're working on, and we've been in discussions with the state on different things we can do to assist in that area. And it's primarily going to be on the educational front to try to address a lot of the crimes that we've seen historically here in Alaska and Anchorage with the high numbers involving crimes of interpersonal violence, sexual assault, child abuse, domestic violence. So those are areas we're going to continue to address, and we're really going to have to rely heavily on our state and community partners to really make an impact. But again, overall, those violent crime numbers are looking much better for us. And Mandy, if you could scroll down to the homicide slide on that one. Okay, there we go. So we had a little bit of an uptick in the first quarter homicides in comparison to last year. And again, those are crimes that we're always looking to make an impact on. And really, everything we do across the board is to have an impact on these crimes. And one area I'm looking at is crimes involving gun violence, and what can we do to better respond and address those. And so that's something that is on my list here to work with our federal partners and strengthening our partnership through the public safety initiative to address. And one area is for gun violence is our our ability to process crime scenes with shell casings and connect gun crimes across the city. So again, that's one area we're going to be looking at, how we're responding. I'm planning some meetings with our ATF representatives to see if we're maximizing all the tools available to us to address gun crime. So that's definitely an area we're going to focus on here in the near future. But again, overall, I think we're in a really good position with what we've done, and we can continually look at ways to improve. But those are two areas that I definitely expect to work closer with our partners for sexual assault and the gun crime that we do see. And Mandy, could you go to our property crime slide, please? Okay. So again, I'll wait 1 second for that slide to get up.
Sure. And while you're paused for a second, I just want to make sure people know that member John Weddleton has joined us, and that if you have questions for the chief, please put it in the chat. Thanks.
Chief McCoy, this is the PowerPoint one, right, that you want?
No, it should be the third one with the crime slides, not the PowerPoint one.
I'm in, guys, by the way.
Okay, well, while we're trying to get that, our property crime numbers have continually gone down also in all categories. We're looking really good there. And again, overall, our crime data is the numbers are very encouraging. Obviously, rebuilding the department has really contributed to helping us appropriately deploy our resources to address the crime that we've seen. And thank you, Mandy, the slide's up. And you can see going back 4 years ago what the numbers look like for our property crime. And we've really been able to impact those. And again, I think having the appropriate staffing levels has allowed us to effectively deploy resources to get detectives involved earlier on in cases, and that really played a role in the stolen vehicle epidemic we saw. Getting detectives involved early, working with our federal partners to bring federal charges at times when appropriate, really allowed us to make a dent in these crimes. And additionally, with the appropriate level of staffing, we've been able to do a number of things, such as create new units, such as our investigative support unit, who has been tasked with, tracking down some of the most violent offenders in the city and making those arrests. And obviously, having more officers on patrol has also impacted the crime numbers that we've seen. So again, overall, I think we're in a really good place. The numbers are trending in the right direction. Again, they're the historic crimes of violence against women that we've seen in sexual assault and domestic violence that we're always looking to make a better impact on. But that's really going to take a partnership with the community to truly educate and get in front of these and to hopefully, get those numbers down any further. So I'd be happy to take a few questions regarding our crime stats, if there are any.
I don't see any questions right now. I actually do have one. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding the data. So these are numbers of calls made categorized under each one of those, or these are actual crimes that have been committed. Can you explain what the numbers in these charts are?
Sure. So these are calls for service. And, we've made the decision to track the numbers by calls for service because that's what the public is feeling. That's what the public reports to us. When we respond to some of these calls, they may get reclassified as other, crime categories, whether it's by the officer at the end of their investigation or by our classifying section when they've actually gone through and scrubbed the numbers. But we think it's the most reflective of what the community is feeling and reporting is to show the calls for service that we receive. And so that's what these numbers are.
I understand.
And then the homicide slide is the actual number of homicide victims.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Thanks.
Sure.
I don't see any additional questions in the chat. Let me just double check here. Oh, I do now. I see one. All right. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chief McCoy, I was looking at the murder statistics, and I noticed that the fourth quarter seemed to, for 18, 19, and 20, have by far the most murders. And I'm just, do we have any idea why that is? Is that a national trend, or is it just a freak, statistic? I'm just not sure why that. It was apparent when I looked at it. So
yes. Yeah, so no, that's a very good observation, Mr. Peterson. We do tend to see more violence in the fourth quarter of the year. Around the holidays and so forth, there seems to be an uptick. And that's not something unique to Alaska and law enforcement as a whole. We tend to deal with more violent crime near the end of the year, and lots of times it's domestic violence related. So yes, very good observation there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Great. Are there any other questions for the? All right. I don't see
John's
any
in the queue.
Oh, John, there you are. Go for it, John.
Sure. I've got a question that it might be too big for this meeting, so you could put it on pause or something, Cameron. But I've had a little back and forth with an email that I think we all got about drug houses, but it brings up some things that I think we all deal with periodically. And so it's what's a drug house? When the neighbors see cars coming and going, briefly. And I think there's also a business where there was recently got an email about, and they just know it's a drug house and they call the police and nothing happens. So you don't care, you're lazy, you don't want to bust them and so on. It's kind of the conclusion. Right. And I don't believe that's the case, but what are the policies there? I mean, one person I said, well, they need more than just neighbors complaining, and this says, no, the policy is 3 calls from neighbors and they're supposed to go bust them. And I'm going, that's probably, so there's a lot of thoughts out there. This might be a whole hour meeting, but can you give us a summary maybe?
Sure. So, Mr. Wellerton, each case is different, and we have to evaluate it based on the information we have, and and if there's enough, then yeah, absolutely, we can take down a drug house during our first visit. So it really varies case by case. But I can tell you what I want to see more of, and we've started moving in this direction. Is really having our officers take ownership of the neighborhoods they're assigned to patrol. Having those beat officers assigned to the same areas, getting to know the neighbors, getting to understand the problems, and then really working together with the community to address those specific concerns in that neighborhood. And, again, that's something that we're working towards, and we are hoping to really fully implement and start having that type of interaction with the community and addressing those problems. I remember many years ago when I was a member of the Mountain View CAP team, that was our philosophy. We were in the neighborhood, we knew the problems, we knew what was going on, and if there was a neighborhood issue, we deployed our resources to address it. And that's what I'd like to see us getting back to. And, that's something that we're working towards, getting our officers to take ownership of those neighborhoods that they patrol, and hand in hand with the community deal with these types of issues. So we could probably go on and on about how to make that happen, but that's the vision.
Great. Can I just real briefly? So,
sure.
So, Chief McCoy, what could someone do that would be helpful then if they're a neighbor and they see this?
So definitely report it to us. if they are seeing the activity. And, I know a lot of people have video cameras now providing us with footage of what's going on. I know some citizens, have gone as far as logging, if there's lots of vehicle traffic back and forth, logging license plate numbers. So when they make a report, they provide us with as much information as possible for us to truly evaluate and see what's occurring. And lots of times citizens feel we're not doing anything in these investigations, and that's not actually 100% correct. These cases can be difficult to investigate, and when we do investigate them effectively, lots of times it's with undercover officers and using confidential informants to buy drugs and to build a case before we're able to truly address these issues. So the public may not actually visibly see what we're doing. A uniformed officer pulling up in their car, sometimes it's not the most effective manner in dealing with a drug house. So it's a lot of things that may be going on that the public actually doesn't see. But there's a lot of work being done to take down some of these drug networks.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Chief. It looks like that's all the questions we have. Do you have everything else for your update for us?
Yeah, that's everything for crime stats, and I'll be back here in a few minutes to talk about body-worn cameras. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we're going to move over to the Anchorage Fire Department. Who from the fire department is going to speak today?
Good morning, everyone. Jody for maybe one more meeting. Woohoo! And we'll hand it off to somebody else.
All right.
I have a few items. We did finally get someone in to start looking at our data. We hired our RMS specialist a while ago, and he's finally started to catch up with our backload. So overall responses for the first quarter of 2021 seem to be down about 5%, and that's compared to the last 5 years. We're not sure exactly why that is. The mid-April, end of April, and early May seems to be gaining ground and will maybe push us back up to our average, which is closer to 100 calls a day. Right now, we're running about 93 to 95 calls a day. So that is nice to have a little bit of a reprieve. It'd be great if our response volume was down, but and we're not sure why. So we'll keep an eye on that, and we'll provide more information in the future. Update on the mobile crisis team hiring. The position announcement for the mental health clinician 2s. I'm going to try to stay away from acronyms today, but the mental health clinician 2s are that closed last week. We had 14 applications from qualified mental health clinician providers, which was very exciting. We will be conducting interviews probably next week and the week after. So we hope to have somebody on board fairly soon, but I have looked at all the applications and was really excited to see the breadth of experience and education that we saw in those applications. You will be seeing, probably not on the next assembly agenda, but sometime in one of the June meetings, we have made updates, significant updates to the private ambulance service ordinance. And I think I've mentioned that in the past. We've been working through language to make sure that it is fully understandable by all parties, and there will be a slight fee increase in some areas. So I just want to give you a heads up that is coming. It is because it's a significant change, and we'll make sure that you guys have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. The Girdwood Fire contract for services is in Girdwood. We're waiting for their final edits, and we heard, I believe they're meeting with the Girdwood Board of Supervisors on the 17th. So maybe for the assembly meeting on the 25th, we may have the Girdwood contract. We're still waiting to see. So the ball is in their court. And the last thing I kind of wanted to report on, I believe, hopefully you remember that last year, maybe even the year before, we anticipated 2020 and 2021 would be big attrition years for Anchorage Fire Department, and that is definitely the case. By the end of by the end of May, we will have lost 16 of our firefighters, and in various ranks, but 56-hour response employees. Fortunately, because we brought on 21 with the academy, we'll be able to we have people to fill those roles. But we are seeing several people who have more than 30 years with the department or 30 years with the municipality are leaving us and moving on to retirement. So we are definitely on track to meet our attrition goals, not really goals, but notifications that we've received, and the support of the academy and making sure that we have a funded academy and we are able to bring a number of qualified people on really helps us manage our staffing and our overtime costs. So thank you very much for that support. And any questions if anyone has anything.
Yeah, that's great. I actually have, and there's definitely some sound feedback going on, but I think we can just work through it. Member LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Hedrick, for the update today. I did have a question concerning the Girdwood Fire and Rescue and appreciate the status update on the contract. It's my understanding that the budget is about 80% expended, the EMS budget for Girdwood Fire and Rescue, and that's before the 175,000. And that figure of the 80% expended is concerning. And I was wondering if you had some comments on that. I'm thinking that maybe we will need to allocate more money, or how do we handle that? I know in the past there have been decisions made about priority calls. It just seems like this is something maybe we should be preparing to identify more resources, and I'd love your thoughts. Thank you.
Through the chair, Assemblymember LaFrance. So that's kind of a little bit of a sticky wicket, because just like Girdwood Fire Department, Anchorage Fire Department, Chugiak Fire Department, we are unbalanced as far as EMS dollars versus fire dollars. We're all kind of, and you guys have heard my spiel, we're all in the exact same boat. We need to rebalance that. What that means for Girdwood Fire is they'll have to use their other funds to cover their costs. And yes, they have some relief coming. However, we can't award that funding until we have a new contract, and we don't see any issues with that. We're just waiting for their edits for the contract. So I think we're in the exact same situation with them this year as we've been in previous years. They, expend the funds that they have, and as we get towards the end of the year, they have to make some decisions. At this point, we have not heard from Chief Weston that they want to reduce services or that they think they need to. I think they're still working through their stuff. But you are correct, probably towards the end of the year, well, hopefully the extra 175,000 will help them get to, bridge that gap. But at the end of the year, we may have the exact same request from them that we've seen in the past, until we can get to the, the full payment that covers the entire year, the 300,000. And even then, depending on their call volume, it may continue to be an issue. Don't really have a solution, or we know what the ideas are. It'll just take us some time to work through it.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Mr. Chair. May I just briefly follow up?
Yes, go ahead.
And Chief, I very much appreciate the attention you've given on the imbalance. And just so we're on the same page, could you just touch on what actions need to be taken to correct it? And if that's too big a conversation, definitely it can wait. But just so we're all, here on the same page as to what we need to do. Thanks.
I can briefly cover it. Basically, in Girdwood, Chugiak, and Eagle River, for the Anchorage Fire Department, Chugiak Volunteer Fire Department, and Girdwood Fire Department, we're funded by, we have two sources: fire service area funds, and in the case of Girdwood's, the Girdwood service area funds that they allocate towards fire, and the area-wide fund. Based on our analysis, it appears that the fire service area taxpayers are actually covering the cost of the delivery of emergency medical services for the municipality. So we would like to balance that out. One of the ideas that's been proposed, I believe started with former municipal manager Falsey, was to change the balance between the mill rates But that's a big conversation because there are people outside of a fire service area or the Birdwood Valley service area who are only paying the area-wide. And that's what would change, is the area-wide tax would increase. And it would probably have to, that change will be a significant change for some people. So how do we do that? Is that the right option, or do we look at some other way to balance those funds out? Hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much, Chief Hetrick. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Chief, it doesn't look like there are any other questions in the queue. So thank you very much for your update. All right, we're going to move on to our update from the Law Department. Is there someone from the Law Department that would like to give us an update today?
Yes, this is Sarah Stanley from the Prosecutor's Office. What the main thing I want to talk to you about today is that we are proposing some code changes to a couple of our ordinances in Title VIII that relate to DV crimes, and we are asking your assistance in getting these changes passed. So I wanted to, I believe the memorandum and the ordinance were both distributed. Can I share screen or Mandy, could we put up the AO draft?
If you want to share, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I can do it.
I can do it. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay. So the first thing, there's three different pieces of our code that we want to fix that present various challenges to us when we're trying to prosecute. The first one is several changes to abuse of a child or vulnerable adult. So the first couple changes are in this section B right here. Previously, the standard was that it had to be intentional, knowing, reckless, or negligent, and you had to, and the person could be prosecuted if they had tortured, cruelly confined, cruelly punished, or physically injured a child. Those higher levels of intent.
Mr. Chair, Sarah, Ms.
Yeah.
Stanley, can you make it bigger? Can you just go
yeah.
to one page per instead of the two?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And actually, I do have a question. Do you know whether, I just want to make sure that I'm clear, whether a work session has been planned for this as well?
No, I am not aware that one has been planned.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that it may be, I want to make sure that you have a chance to sort of go over this,
Right,
but
right.
it may be something that if it requires a work session to have more in-depth conversation, just to make sure we give people the time that it requires.
Oh, absolutely. And I want to be able to answer any questions. And I also don't want to take over this whole meeting. So I'm going to try to do a quick overview and sort of touch on things. And then I'm always available to address any further questions or a possible work session in the future.
Great, thanks.
So in this section B of abuse of a child, basically having all those standards of intent listed doesn't help us when we're prosecuting with jurors, because jurors, if they find something's not intentional, then they get down, by the time they get down to reckless or negligent, they're beginning to think that the behavior wasn't such a big deal. So those higher levels are kind of distracting to jurors. So to clean up that language, we wanted to get rid of that. And basically we're going to simplify it and just say recklessly causes or permits a child to be physically injured. It will remain a crime to negligently torture or cruelly punish or cruelly confine a child. So that standard will remain at negligence, but the standard for physically injuring a child will be reckless. So we actually kind of raised that from negligent. The reality is that we generally do not prosecute parents who negligently cause simple injury to a child. That would be something like, you know, watching your child at the playground and failing to supervise them, you know, because you got distracted or something, that kind of injury. So we're clarifying that we're prosecuting reckless injury to children or negligent torture and cruel confinement, cruel punishment.
Great. And Sarah, I have a question for you. Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And perhaps, Sarah, you were going to get to this, but the mens rea of the intentional, let's see, what is it? Knowing or intentional? What do you say here? Yeah, intentionally and knowingly. Is that now in a different section, or are we sort of assuming these are all sort of lesser included offenses and then the state will handle those as felonies?
Well, so if you if you injure a child intentionally, it's included in reckless, right? So we're just cleaning up the language. So,
well, yeah, I guess so. But I mean, but we're also saying basically that we're saying that intentional or knowingly now are the same as reckless, basically, right? I mean, we're saying that there's no higher level punishment for somebody that knowingly does something versus someone who recklessly does something.
Correct. And there wasn't before. I mean, even when we had the intentional language, there was no higher consequence for it being intentional instead of reckless.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. But I mean, it is still a little bit odd, right? Usually we have a more severe thing for intentional and knowing. I don't know. Maybe I'm not familiar with our I'm certainly not as familiar with the criminal code as you are, but I don't know of, at the state level at least, there being crimes where there isn't at least some crime that is intentional or knowing, right?
So actually, one reason we're changing this is to actually match our assault standard. So our mens rea for assault is actually recklessly causing injury. So this, if we change it to reckless, it actually, so in the city criminal code, several of our crimes are actually just reckless. There isn't a higher level of the crime for intentional.
And these are all misdemeanors, right?
Yes, these are all misdemeanors.
Okay. So it still kind of makes sense. I mean, if someone was intentionally harming a child, you'd assume that there would be a state level felony that could be prosecuted. Is that a mistaken assumption?
Yes. So intentional is this misdemeanor. If you intentionally harm a child, it's currently under our current law, it's a misdemeanor.
No, this is my last question, then I want us to move on. But
no, it's fine.
It's under our law, but is there a state law that they could be charged with a felony by a state prosecutor?
For intentionally harming a child? I don't think there's not an aggravated intentional harming a child.
Huh. Okay, interesting.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sarah, can I just interrupt for a moment, Chair? This is Jessica Willoughby, Assistant Municipal Attorney. I helped work on this AO. Sarah, if you would just underline subsection B. This was my oversight and I apologize. And we will make this update. Yeah, that should all be underlined as new language. Folks will remember legislative formatting. Underlined is new language and capitalized bracketed is removed language. We did it this way because of the technical nature of the criminal code. We're hoping to make this change more clear.
Thank you.
Oh.
The next change that we have.
Sarah, I just want to have one small question. I just want to make sure I understand this. And again, I don't want to beat this to death, but so reckless can be intentional or unintentional.
Yes. If you do something.
Yeah, and so there's no higher standard, or it's not worse to be intentional than it is to be unintentional based on this.
Well, there's intentional is generally a higher sort of level of crime in general, but if one commits harms a child intentionally, you are also being reckless.
Right.
So this has been basically we've been prosecuting intentional, knowing, and reckless all the same way all these years. So this just cleans up the language. because we discovered that jurors get distracted by the intentional and knowing language.
Got it. Okay. And it looks like I have another question for you. And I do have a hand that's raised, and I don't know whether that hand is from someone from the public or someone else, but if it is someone from the public.
Chief McCoy, I have my hand up. If I may,
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman.
Go
I
ahead.
just want to add a clarifying point regarding the crime being a felony. So that would be based on the severity of the injury to the child or the vulnerable adult. So, in a circumstance where the injuries were severe enough, that would automatically bump up to a felony, and the state would take on that prosecution and evaluate the mental state, whether it's intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, which would have varying penalties based on the severity of the injury. So I just want to throw that in there for clarification. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Chief. That was very helpful. Yes, if there's more serious injury, it does become a higher level of crime. So we're talking about simple physical injury, non-serious.
Great. And then I have one other question from Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was wondering, does it have to be physical abuse to be tortured, or could it be continually verbally abusing a child or a vulnerable adult?
That I have never, I believe it has to be physical. What I can't remember is if we actually have that definition in our code. But yes, torture is construed by my office to be physical. So.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. The next change that we're proposing is to delete sections D, E, and F of this statute. These sections were put in to, first of all, in section F, which is right here, it's a list of conduct that is presumed to be unreasonable. For example, branding a child, withholding multiple meals, torturing a child. And so I believe the intent, I can assume, was to really send a signal to our community that these behaviors are not okay. The problem that we're coming up against is that they're only prima facie unreasonable, which means it's a presumption that can be overcome. So the unintentional result of this code, the way it stands, is that it sends the message to a juror that branding a child is presumably not okay, but you can overcome that presumption somehow and find that branding a child is reasonable. So that confuses jurors somewhat. Also, another problem is when you have a list like this, it sends the message to jurors that things not on this list must be reasonable, but that's not the case. For example, if you say it's unreasonable to scald a child, someone might think, oh, then it's okay to put them in a cold bath for an ice bath for 20 minutes, that kind of thing. So that causes confusion for our jurors. Another reason we want to delete these sections is because the Court of Appeals, in a case that I actually, I think I sent along with the other documents, has signaled that they have these problems with this piece of the code. They commented that they don't like that our code basically allows torture as long as a parent can argue that it's reasonable parental discipline. They also noted that this is the section where the factors to consider whether something is reasonable parental discipline. The Court of Appeals also noted that some of these factors are objective and some are subjective, such as the apparent motive of the parent, and that is problematic. So the Court of Appeals had several concerns with this section of our code and signaled in sort of an aside in a court decision that it could be unconstitutional. So we're proposing to delete all of that. There's already a justification defense under state law that would apply to parents who harm a child for their welfare. And parents would still have that defense, which is encoded in state law and which can be used by our defendants. And we would get rid of a lot of this confusion for jurors. It would make this easier to prosecute. And the Court of Appeals has signaled that they don't like this part of our statute or code, and that it could be struck down as unconstitutional in the future. So for all those reasons, we would like to just delete this. A lot of these arguments about the factors of what's reasonable or what is, for the good of a child end up in reality getting argued out in court through jury instructions and that kind of thing. And so it's really not necessary to have it in our code, and it is confusing to people and to jurors. The next part is harassment. We want to update this for the modern age and also to make some common sense things crimes that you would think would have been crimes already. So our first one change is that we see a lot of cases where an abuser, especially a DV abuser, threatens to publish electronic pictures of a sexual nature, the victim. Right now, it's only a crime to actually publish them. So that abuser can exert a lot of control over that victim by just threatening. And we see this all the time, but it's currently not a crime. So we would like to make that a crime. We added images and videos to the list of ways you could publish. Another change we would like to make is that currently it's only a crime to contact someone if it's offensive physical contact. We would like to add unwanted. We've actually had cases where a man grabbed a strange woman on the street, and the contact was genitals or buttocks or female breast, and all he has to say, and jurors can get hung up on what is offensive physical contact and what that means, but really we want to prosecute if someone does that and it's unwanted. The next thing is that right now it's a crime to touch these parts of the body through clothing. However, it's not a crime to touch those parts of the body without clothing. We would like to be able to prosecute that. That seems like a common sense thing that should be a crime if touching through someone's clothing is a crime. And then in the last section, criminal mischief, just to summarize.
Sarah,
oh, go ahead.
Sarah, yeah, let me,
Yeah.
I know that Ms. Altel wanted to ask a question related to harassment. Go ahead.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Stanley. On A there, can we talk a little bit about annoying effect and what the legal meaning of the words annoying effect mean? Are they defined in case law or elsewhere?
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry, I skipped over that change and I didn't mean to. First, do you mind, before I answer your question, do you mind if I just address that change real quick?
Sure, yes, please.
So basically, we had a case where someone walked up to someone else and I forgot what it was. Maybe just kissed them or something, but a stranger kissed them on the lips or grabbed them. I don't remember. Anyway, the defendant his defense was, well, I wasn't intending to harass or annoy the person. I thought they'd like it. And so that, as soon as they say that, a jury can find it's not a crime. So we wanted to change this to delete intent to harass or annoy, which focuses on the intent of the defendant, to reckless disregard for any harassing or annoying effect. So the point is the effect on the victim, not the defendant's motive, because then that confuses jurors. Annoy, no. Annoy is not defined in our code.
Can I follow up on that really quick then?
Yep.
I'm a little bit worried about annoying effect. I appreciate we're going to look at this from the victim's perspective, and I totally get why we're adding reckless disregard. I'm actually surprised it wasn't something like that prior. But I could see this having some unintended consequences. So I don't know if there is a way or a consideration, and I just throw it out so that we can talk about it some more and maybe have, when we have a work session, what annoying might mean.
because I think it means a lot of things to a lot of people when in fact it's probably a bit of a term of art when it's actually applied, and probably applied by APD in terms of whether or not to take any particular actions. I think it's somewhat defined by the factors below, but those seem really to get more toward harassment to me. But I don't know. So it's just, I just have caution. I mean, I see it had annoy in it previously. I don't know how many times people were prosecuted for being annoying or an intent to annoy, because the factors seem really to go more towards harassment. So just some thoughts and some caution, but totally open to the conversation. Thanks.
So, thank you. Yeah, I think the reality is that most of the cases we get under this code really are harassing cases. I mean, not cases where someone is annoyed, which seems a very de minimis word, right? So.
Yeah, and I had a hand up, but it went down. Was there someone that had a question?
Through the chair, that this is Kate Vogel, Municipal Attorney. I was just going to point out what Assembly Members Altal got to, which is that it's not just about the annoying effect, because there are those 5 limiting conditions which help us cabin the term annoying from sort of what we think of it. You know, one of these 5 pretty significant things needs to have happened, but Assembly Members Altal pointed that out on her own. And so I think we can certainly look at where annoy has been used as a term of art, and see if it's worth keeping in.
Thanks. Sarah, go ahead.
The last one is a very quick one, criminal mischief. For those of you that don't know, criminal mischief is basically, well, the subsections we prosecute the most are damaging the property of another person. This is frequently a domestic violence crime, more than a non-domestic violence crime. So you have a situation where there's violence in the home, someone punches a wall, throws something, that kind of thing. So there's 2 sections here, 1 and 7, that previously said that the mens rea had to be with intent to do so. We propose deleting that. Our city code already has language in it, which says that if no mens rea is specified in a crime, then the mens rea is knowing as to conduct and reckless as to the result. The reason we want to make this change is because frequently you could have a DV event, situation, argument where, someone, punches a wall or throws something and breaks it. And all they have to do to get around it is to say, oh, well, I didn't intend to break that object. I intended to scare my significant other, that kind of thing. So intent is pretty hard to prove, and really negates the purpose of this code, especially in DV situations. So we would like to change it to knowing as to conduct and reckless as to the consequence of breaking the item. And that's all I have.
Great. And Ms. Vogel, you have an addition?
Yeah, no, I was just hoping that Sarah could help explain what knowing as to conduct would mean in that example, because I don't think it's something that non-lawyers think about very much. So in the throwing a plate example, if we're not showing that they intended to destroy the plate, what do we need to show with knowing as to conduct?
So we need to show that they knew they were throwing a plate and that they disregarded the possibility that that plate could break, basically.
Thank you. All right. Looks like I have a question from Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Stanley, I noticed under the criminal mischief section, both A1 and A7 are very similar. One talks about damage property of another in an amount of $50 or more, and the other one says damage property of another in an amount of less than $50. So it sounds like to me there's not really any kind of restriction on the value of property, but maybe you can explain to me why we have those 2 distinct components there? Thanks.
Yes, A7 is a Class B misdemeanor, and so therefore carries less time than a Class A misdemeanor. So you would, so if
Okay,
someone's convicted, they would get a smaller consequence.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sarah, it looks like there are no additional questions.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I took a fair amount of your time. So thank you.
You did it very efficiently. Thanks. All right, so we are going to move on to new business, and I believe we have a presentation by the Chugiak Volunteer Fire and Rescue.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is Chief Benningfield. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Yeah. Do you have any questions for us today?
Perfect. Thank you. Mandy, I wasn't sure if you wanted to put the PDF up, or if you wanted me to share the screen. I would prefer that you could put it up. That would be great.
Here we go. All right, it's up.
All right, thank you. I'll just every once in a while tell you what page to choose, and we'll talk about it. So again, Chief Benningfield, Chugiak Volunteer Fire and Rescue. I was able to send this report out to everyone in the beginning of March, and hopefully everyone has had a chance to peruse it. I sent it out again last week for this meeting, hoping that I can answer any questions. But I just wanted to summarize and highlight the events of 2020 and how the members of Chugiak Volunteer Fire and Rescue have served the fire service area out there. So Mandy, if you wouldn't mind, go to page 3 of that report. All right, so just to remind everyone, Chugiak Volunteer Fire and Rescue exists as a nonprofit 501, and we are a contractor of the municipality. So the Volunteer Fire Department 501 is made up of a board of directors and numerous members that are also responders. In addition to that, as you all know, there's a board of supervisors elected from the fire service area that oversees the finances of the fire department. No matter what contractor that is, it just happens to be Chugiak Volunteer Fire and Rescue at this point. We are in the starting the second year, actually the third year of our contract, which was negotiated with a team between the nonprofit as well as AFD back 2 years ago. The department is currently made up of 4 full-time staff. That includes myself, a training coordinator, an administrative specialist, as well as a maintenance specialist. And all of the rest of the members are made up of volunteer responders from the community. So Mandy, I think that would take me to slide number 5, or page number 5, please. So what I'm looking at in the middle of that page right there is to tell you that at the end of the year, we were at 104 volunteer members. We usually hover somewhere between 100 and 115 members at any given time. Our geography lends us to be a transient fire department. We do have members that have been around for, we have a member that's been there for 35 years. We have members that have been there everywhere in between, but we do have a large transient population. They come and go because of opportunities that they get with us. So last year, at the end of last year, our volunteers provided 61,148 hours. That's amazing. And just to remind you, the volunteer responders of Chugiak are volunteer responders. They get nothing. There's no paid on call. There's no stipends. There's nothing. They staff our stations and they make calls on a purely volunteer basis. So across the country, the Department of Labor puts a value on a volunteer hour in every state. And it just so happens in Alaska, the Department of Labor says that a volunteer hour, now this is generally speaking, not firefighters, but a volunteer hour is worth approximately $28 in the state of Alaska, $28 an hour. I would assert that a volunteer firefighter would probably be expected to be worth more than that general average. But all being the same, I assert that the volunteer responders of Chugiak saved the members of the Chugiak Fire Service area approximately $1.7 million a year. Now that's amazing, because I'll remind you that our mill rate of 1 brings in less than $1.7 million a year. So we do the job of fire service in the Chugiak Fire Service area for about $1.2 million every year. Our operating budget is about $850,000 fire and about $175,000 EMS. Which I'll take this opportunity just to remind you that Chief Heptrick's topic earlier is absolutely something that we're that we are looking at very very strongly. So you can see our 3-year trend in the box. 924 runs in 2018, 1,110 in 2020. So that's not going to change. Those are going to continue to trend upwards. We know that. We have an aging population. We have just a variety of reasons that those are going to continue to go up. And as is typical with fire service agencies across the country, we do approximately 70% of our incidents being emergency medical services. So if you wouldn't mind, Mandy, go to page 7. Did we lose Mandy?
Nope, you're on page 7.
Okay, mine is not. Mine must be lagging. I apologize for that. So on page 7, basically what I wanted to point out there is some equipment changes that were made this year. As you know, we typically fund through either our operational budget or by coming to the assembly and saying, hey, our fund balance needs to be accessed for equipment. So what you're seeing there, top right-hand corner, is one of the newest ambulances in the area-wide EMS fleet. We were grateful to be able to get that from Anchorage. The bottom left, you're seeing the newest suppression apparatus, which just arrived. We're going to put that in service on the 19th of this month. That apparatus, remember, we came to the assembly late last year to access our fund balance. We purchased that with cash, receiving multiple discounts, and we ended up paying about $620,000 for that, which saved us about $50,000 by being able to pay for that with our fund balance, with cash on hand. And Mandy, I'll ask you to go to page 8. Page 8 just illustrates, just a reminder to everyone that we operate 5 stations. Those 5 stations exist, some of them just by chance, some of them strategically located. Obviously, the fire station closest to Eagle River is there because of a increase in the population in that area over the years. Station 31 is the station, if you're not real familiar with the area, that's the one that's out across from the Moosehorn Quarry. That one gives us our population center. That gives us our ability to house our firefighters and EMS responders 24/7, right in the middle of our population center. And then Station 33 out at Peters Creek, that station gives us our geography center. Easy access to the highway. We're able to get on the highway and go north or south with our rescue apparatus. So they just all make sense. Some of the changes that we're going to be seeing in the next several years, our strategic plan is to put more focus on the maintenance and the apparatus that are in the stations that are along the highway, because they give us the best benefit. Their locations are just perfect for what we do. So we're sitting pretty well with Station 35. That station was built in 2014 with a big grant from the state legislature that was administered by the municipality. Station 31 has been well kept over the years. Station 33, on the other hand, out at Peters Creek, really needs some attention. And I wanted to just kind of transition and bring that topic up. Assemblymember Kennedy and several of the legislators have I've been bending their ear lately, and the station out at Peters Creek will certainly be one that we're looking for some funding to increase our ability to house apparatus there, as well as just to upgrade that station. Mandy, if you would, let's go to page 9. Page 9 is just a pictorial of the facilities that we have right now. Top left, Station 31, that's our training area. Many of you will remember that we accessed some money from our fund balance to put a training tower there last year. We're getting great results from that. Station 32 to the right, we've done a pretty good job lately of keeping it maintained. Station 33, middle left, that's the station I'm talking about needing some attention in the near future. Station 34 on the right, that's a shared facility with the Department of Transportation down at the Birchwood Airport. And then Station 35 at Fire Lake, that's our office administrative facilities, and that's our newest station. It was built in 2014. Next slide would be number 10, if you would. Thanks, Mandy. I assume everyone can see it. I'm lagging just a little bit. I apologize. I am about 4,000 miles away in Indiana as we speak, taking a little time off. But our training, the training slide, I just wanted to point out, we're pretty self-sufficient. We do a lot of our internal training, but we have done a lot of training this past couple of years, collaborating with other agencies, including Anchorage Fire Department. I want a big shout out to Chief Hetrick. I believe we've got a great relationship, and I appreciate the effort that we've gone to collaborate on some training. But we were able to achieve over 7,000 hours internally, and just remember that was in a COVID year. A lot of that training was Zoom and Teams and virtual, as you all have experienced yourselves. So with that being said, Mandy, I'll ask you to go down to slide number 16. And slide number 16 just gives me a great segue to say that we've got great community support. The residents, the businesses out in the community, our assembly members, our legislators are always interested, always willing to talk. And that's why I've been very adamant lately in talking to Assemblywoman Kennedy, just to prime to say, hey, we need some help. So I would really like to entertain any questions about this report, if anyone has any. Otherwise, I just want to go real quickly after that, and I'll share my screen. So if there are any questions, Mr. Chair, I would be willing to answer those at this point.
Okay, great. Let me look in the chat here. Does any member have questions at this point? It doesn't look like there are any questions at this point. Looks like your presentation was pretty comprehensive.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but anyway, thank you for.
No, thanks very much.
Sometimes comprehensive means lengthy.
No. I thought it was done very, very well. So thanks for your time, and thanks for the information. We're gonna move on to our final. We're gonna move on to our final item before audience participation, and that's on body camera policy review update. And Chief McCoy, if you'd like to start that.
Great, thank you. Hello, it's Chief McCoy again. So we're going to talk a little bit about body-worn cameras. And yeah, Mandy, feel free to put that up anytime you want. What Mandy's putting up on the screen is kind of a roadmap to where our policy will be developed, leading all the way up to implementation. And this is definitely a working document, and we'll refine it as we go, adding dates and events. But this is where we're starting from. So, kind of give you a little overview here. As far as implementing a body-worn camera system here at APD, the most important component of that is the policy. And so we've done our homework and we've put together an outline or a draft policy that's based on national best practices. As many of you recall, Anchorage and APD, we are we were named a public safety partnership city a couple of years ago. So we've been working with our partners with the Department of Justice on looking at national best practices surrounding body-worn cameras. And they've lended consultants to us from the Bureau of Justice Administration and really have helped us, just kind of get a handle on what's best practice. And that's kind of what's gone into our initial draft outline. And although we have that draft in place, there are numerous considerations that we have to take into account, and that we must truly get feedback from our community on the direction we need to go. And there are many questions that have to be answered, and the answers to those questions really vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction across the country. There's really no set standard for a lot of the specific questions we as a community are going to have to answer. And and there are many questions, but some of the things are like, who will wear the body-worn cameras at APD? When will we be required to activate the cameras? When can we deactivate the cameras? Are we going to be required to notify the public when we're recording? Are we going to record victims? What about sensitive locations like locker rooms or residential bathrooms? Are the cameras on or off? Will officers be allowed to review footage? For instance, when they're writing their police reports or when they're preparing to go to court, are we going to allow them to look at the video footage to, prep for that? Will supervisors be allowed to review the footage themselves to address administrative complaints, to do follow-up to ensure that officers are being compliant with the systems? When they're reviewing incident reports, those are questions we'll have to answer. And then I think the biggest question that the public is going to want to know is, are we going to release the footage? And that varies across the country. Some jurisdictions are required to have the footage out by 7 days. Others are not allowed to put the footage out unless they get authorization from their state Department of Law. And so really there's no right or wrong answer. The answer is going to be what does our community want? And again, there are many legal considerations that we have to take into account. Alaska has a very strong privacy clause in our Constitution. So those are all things that we are going to have to make decisions on. And I just touched on a few of them, but there's many more questions that we're going to have to answer. And so with that, I've laid out this roadmap. And for me, step one is to hear from the public. This week, I announced that we're going to be holding a public listening session, and that's going to be June 16th at East High School. And like I said, for me, that is the most important step. I've made a promise to the community that we will listen to them and that they will have an opportunity to participate in building this policy. And so that's what we intend to do with that first listening session. I'm hoping we have a good turnout and the public comes and shares their thoughts, their concerns, their expectations with me on what they want to see out of this policy. And once we have that session, we will take that information, refine that initial framework that we've built of a policy, and then move to our next phase, which will be taking that draft policy in front of the Public Safety Advisory Commission. As you see on my chart, I don't have a date for that yet. So we're flexible. We're probably going to need a couple of weeks after that listening session to go through whatever information we receive from the public, refine that, put it into the policy, and we're willing to do special work sessions with the commission, or if they want to hold this at their next regularly scheduled meeting, that's fine also. But that would be the next step for us, is to take what we have before the commission and really go through it line by line and answer questions and further refine that document. And and step 3 would be then coming, I envision bringing it before the Public Safety Committee next. And as I mentioned, all of this is flexible at this point, but that would be the next phase. And we would continually go through this process, refining the document, answering questions. And I think the further we go, we should be having a better project. Step number 4, have community stakeholders. And so I didn't list them all, but there are several various groups that we would like to meet with, to share the policy with, to get feedback. And just some of those are, the Muni's Chief Equity Officer, the NAACP, ACLU, the Alaska Black Caucus. We also need to meet with the Anchorage Police Department Employees Association. They've already signaled that implementing body-worn cameras is going to be a change in working conditions. So those are conversations that we're going to have, and so there will be ample opportunity for us to bring the policy before these stakeholders, get additional input, feedback, buy-in, and continue refining as we go. Then step number 5 would be bringing what we've created back to the public, allowing one final opportunity for public input and inclusion, and then we bring that into implementation. And again, obviously, the public can participate at any of these phases. They will have that opportunity. But that's just kind of a general roadmap that we're on right now. And while all this is taking place in the background, we will be going through the acquisition process to buy cameras, to do all the technical work in the background with our infrastructure to ensure that we can successfully implement them. We will have to be doing training in the background of our officers on utilizing the equipment and so forth. So that'll be going on in the background at the same time we're working our way through these phases of implementing a policy or creating a policy. So I know that was really quick, but I definitely wanted to give some time for questions. That's again kind of the general roadmap. That's a working document that we'll continually refine and add dates in there, but there's a lot to discuss.
Great. Thank you, Chief. And I do have a question for you from Ms. Zalato.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the outline, Chief. I appreciate that. I think there's a natural tension, however, in this particular policy area between APD doing the policy in its, I guess I'll call it normal policies and procedures route, of course, with all this additional community input and the role of the assembly. I think there are policy considerations that this body may wish to provide to you, whether that's through a resolution or some other means. So I would just ask that you consider where the best timing for that may be and what you've laid out, so we don't come in possibly at the 11th hour and upset the apple cart. But we'll be listening as well in these public input opportunities. So I just want to balance your needs, some of our expectations, and so that we can do this collaboratively and provide that input at the right time.
No, I appreciate that. And through the chair, Ms. Zalatel, we'd be happy to adjust, the steps to some degree. Like I said, for me, the most important step is number one, and that's listening to the public. That's a commitment that I intend to honor. However, if you feel that the Assembly and APD should have a conversation prior to Public Safety Advisory Commission, I'm absolutely willing to make those adjustments, and we can have those conversations in work sessions. So please let me know what you all would like to do. We're flexible here, and we want to work together to ensure that the policy meets the needs of everyone's interests. And so, we definitely want to work together. There's a lot of important questions that have to be answered, and we're definitely going to have to get all of our minds together to get it right. So thank you for that. And please just let me know, and we can adjust this timeline.
Thank you. Could I do a really quick follow-up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I'm really interested in the role the Public Safety Advisory Commission can play. I think boards and commissions are a great resource to departments and the Assembly members. So I'm definitely interested in hearing from them and any recommendations they may have prior to getting involved personally with any work on the issue. So I'm not looking to insert myself there beyond hearing from them. And I'm hoping that they will take a robust role in both revising what's proposed and looking at other jurisdictions' policies and making some recommendations to this committee. Thank you.
Thanks. And I do have another question for you, but before I go there, I'll just share that I did have an opportunity to speak with Kendra Kloster today, and that it is the intention of the Public Safety Advisory Commission to take a robust role in this process, and that they are working with APD to look at a timeline as we've been presented, and are planning on trying to hold some listening sessions themselves. And I think one of the advantages of that is that who hosts those sessions should be different at different times. For instance, if APD hosts one, if the commission hosts one, and I think you'll have different people coming to different ones, and you'll have different types of conversations at those. So I think that's a really wonderful way to try to gather as much public input as possible. But Kendra and APD are working on that now, and I think we'll see some, as the chief said, some dates coming soon for when we can expect to see those different listening sessions and meetings. I'll go to Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo the comments made by Ms. Zalatel, and state that I believe we should look at passing some type of policy resolution, of course, with the understanding that the end decision is made by the chief of police as the sort of expert in this area. But there is, of course, a lot of interest in community discussion and having dialogue around this. So I look forward to hearing from the community and seeing future iterations of the draft policy. And, probably, I imagine somewhere in the middle of the process there would be a good place for us to consider having some type of resolution brought forward to the full body. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just add that I agree with that. I liked in your timeline, the public safety meeting, which is a meeting of the whole, so the entire assembly, and having that happen after these listening sessions happening after the initial one and after the commission seems like a good time for the assembly to do a resolution and to provide our sort of thoughts and feedback and guidance to you. And so that can all be wrapped up and put into a package and then brought back to the public, as you said at the very end, for sort of a final review. So it seems like you've already sort of planned that a bit. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and the community input from the commission and the assembly are all things that we want to incorporate in this policy, because at the end of the day, we all, our entire community has to feel good about this policy. We're bringing these cameras on in the hopes that they help instill trust and further transparency and accountability with the police department. And again, as I mentioned when I started, the policy is the most important component of it. And if there's not trust in the policy, we're wasting our time. So we definitely want to be inclusive in this process. And like I said, the steps are, I can move those around. We're flexible. We're willing to work with everyone to accomplish this. So just please let me know, and we'll roll up our sleeves and get it done. Captain Sean Case is my project manager on this. He and Kendra have spoken several times. I believe they spoke this morning about this. So yeah, I expect the commission to have a robust level of participation with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your time. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make time for audience participation or public participation. And so if you would like to speak, we'll just do it first come, first serve. I'm going to set a timer, and so you'll hear a sound when it goes off, but if you can just share your name, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Who would like to go first?
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
I have my timer. Okay. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman, 43-year Alaska resident, 20 years Anchorage resident, and currently a Metro Valley resident. I'm talking about this, and I mentioned at the previous committee meeting, and it's a deep concern, is Tuesday night you are going to meet as an assembly to certify the decision on a recount for 2 school board seats. That's been scheduled, properly scheduled, and so forth. Monday, there will be 2 significant meetings. One is the Election Commission work session. It's a public meeting where they're handling the ballots, and it's from 3 to 4 p.m. And mind you, this is 2 school board seats for a recount with a narrow race. Then what follows at 5 o'clock, and it stays to whenever they're done, is the public canvass. This is a place where if there's any questions, concerns, or whatever, and that's when, after that happens, then the Election Commission signs off on a report, and it comes for you Tuesday night. But what's happened is the scheduling of a work session dealing with a care relief plan and town hall for that Monday night, starting at 4:30 to 7 p.m. And you're going to follow with a public hearing the next day in the evening. With all due respect, the 2 most important decisions you have to make as assembly is approving the budget and certifying the election. Having this conflict allowed to stay, which is totally inappropriate. Maybe you did not realize this situation was occurring. You need to correct it and do so immediately so that the public has a fair chance and yourselves have a fair chance to participate in that important 2 meetings that deals with that recount, a canvass meeting, and so forth. Otherwise, people will have to make a choice to attend your meeting at Lusac Library, dealing with the CARES Act funding, and then attending the meetings, the public canvass meetings, and so forth that are happening for the public to attend. thank you. And with all due respect, I didn't talk about cameras today because this was important to address, and I hope it gets resolved and not delay any further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Would anybody else like to speak for audience? I see a hand raised. From Andy.
This is Andy Erickson. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead. I'll start your timer.
Great. Well, I just had a quick question about what Chief McCoy said. I think I heard him say that during the background there would be sort of equipment acquisition and training going on while the process of developing the policies for body-worn cameras is developed. And I'm just confused as to how that could possibly be the case, given that if the policy is not developed, how can you conduct training for APD officers on using body-worn cameras if you don't know exactly what the procedures will be? To me, maybe I misheard Chief McCoy, but to me that just seemed a bit bizarre. And if there's any clarification on that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. And normally we don't have questions answered during testimony, but Chief, if you want to just give a quick clarification, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So obviously the acquisition is going to take some time. What I anticipate is that once we start acquiring the equipment, a good portion of the policy will probably already be in effect. And when I say training, it's mostly on the technical aspects of, are the cameras working properly? Are we capturing the footage? Are we able to upload the footage appropriately? Is it able to appropriately transfer to the district attorney's office in our evidence module? So in the background, I'm really talking about the technical aspects of the cameras. Yeah, obviously, once the policy is solidified, the officers will have to be educated on the policy and be completely familiar with the rules of engagement with that. So again, in the background, there will be acquisition and there will be technical functions being tested.
Thanks. Okay, would anybody else like to speak? We have a few more minutes before our end. Okay, hearing none. Thank you all for your time. This was a really good meeting. Enjoy the rest of your day, and this meeting is adjourned.